Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves adrift in a quiet sea of forgotten gadgets and wonderfully pointless ideas. It's a landscape cluttered with the ghosts of inventions that promised so much, yet delivered, well, often, not very much at all. We're going to gently sift through the dust of history, uncovering the charmingly absurd and the bafflingly beloved. It's a journey so profoundly mundane, so soothingly superfluous, you probably won't survive this. With your eyes open. Anyway, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to whisper your location and local time into the comments below. It's always nice to know where our fellow dreamers are dozing off. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel yourself drifting now, settling into a comfortable stillness, as if you're reclining in an enormous dimly lit archive of human endeavor. Around you, unseen on dusty shelves, lie countless artifacts, each one whispering a tale of hope, of aspiration, and quite often, of a spectacular misjudgment of public need. This initial part of our journey isn't about specific objects just yet. It's about that curious, almost gravitational pull that new things exert upon us, that peculiar human yearning for the next big thing, even when that thing is, in retrospect, remarkably silly or utterly unhelpful. Imagine that gentle, almost electrical tingle of encountering something entirely novel. It's a sensation as old as humanity itself. You can picture your distant ancestors, their eyes widening at a freshly knapped flint, not just for its utility, but for its unfamiliar sheen, its improved edge. Fast forward through millennia, and the objects change, but that subtle hum of fascination remains. It's the siren song of innovation, luring us towards shores that are sometimes fertile and groundbreaking, and other times, well, just a bit barren and cluttered with peculiar driftwood. Why do we chase the gleam of the newfangled, even when our gut, or perhaps just a quiet, common-sense voice in the back of our mind, whispers that it might be a tad unnecessary? Part of it, surely, is the promise of improvement, the dream of a slightly easier, more comfortable, or more entertaining life. Each new invention, no matter how modest, carries within its design the implicit suggestion that yesterday's methods were somehow lacking. And who doesn't want to be on the cutting edge of, well, something? There's a certain status, a quiet pride in possessing what others do not, in being an early adopter of the future, even if that future involves a self-tipping hat or a bicycle designed for squirrels. The very newness can be intoxicating, a brief escape from the mundane, a flicker of excitement in the everyday. You might recall the sheer spectacle and public fervour surrounding the Great Exhibition of 1851 held in London's Crystal Palace. It wasn't just a trade fair, it was a monumental celebration of human ingenuity, drawing millions to gaze upon thousands of innovations, from mighty steam engines to intricate lace-making machines. This event, more than any before it, truly ignited a global appetite for the novel and the improved, regardless of ultimate practicality for the average person. Yet, this allure isn't always about tangible benefits. Sometimes, it's about the story we tell ourselves, or the story the inventor, the marketer, the softly persuasive advertisement tells us. Consider the sheer optimism embedded in a device that promises to, say, perfectly fold your newspaper with a complex series of levers and springs. Does it save much time? Probably not. Is it prone to jamming? Almost certainly. But for a fleeting moment, it represents a tiny triumph of human ingenuity over a minor inconvenience. And there's a strange comfort in that. The precise reasons for this persistent embrace of the impractical are still discussed by experts, with some theories pointing towards deep-seated cognitive biases that make us value novelty, while others suggest it's more about social signaling, showing others we are forward-thinking or affluent enough to acquire such things. This fascination can even lead us down paths that seem, with the clarity of hindsight, astonishingly ill-advised. Think of the early 20th century, when radium, a newly discovered element, was imbued with an almost magical aura. For a time, you could find radium-infused products marketed for all sorts of applications: radium water, radium chocolate, even radium-laced cosmetics and toothpaste, all promising vitality and health. Here was novelty at its most potent and perilous. People bought into the hype, drawn by the promise of scientific advancement and well-being, long before the profound dangers of radioactivity were widely understood. It's a stark reminder that the new doesn't always equate to better, and sometimes it's just a well-packaged hazard, wrapped in the enticing glimmer of progress. So, as you settle deeper into this gentle exploration, let this initial thought cradle you. This attraction to the novel, this sometimes baffling embrace of the impractical, isn't a flaw. It's a fundamental, often charming, and occasionally hilarious aspect of what makes us human. It's the same impulse that leads to breathtaking artistry and world-changing discoveries, just occasionally manifesting in a self-straining teapot or a pair of spectacles for a chicken. It's the quiet hum of what if that has echoed through human history, a sound that can be both wonderfully productive and wonderfully, sleepily absurd. Allow your mind to drift with this idea, this gentle acknowledgement of our collective, enduring, and often endearing gullibility when faced with the bright, shiny promise of something different. The potential for a slightly more interesting, if not necessarily more efficient, tomorrow has always been a powerful lure, hasn't it? And so, with this universal human fondness for the novel tucked gently into your awareness, you feel the currents of time carry you back, softly now, to a particular epoch where this fascination blossomed with an almost feverish, if endearingly eccentric, energy. You find yourself stepping lightly into the fog-wreathed streets and gaslit parlours of the 19th century, the Victorian era. The air itself seems to hum with a mixture of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint metallic scent of nascent industry. It's an age of immense change, of iron horses thundering across landscapes, of telegraph wires crackling with unseen messages, and an almost unshakable belief in the onward march of progress. This era, perhaps more than any before it, truly fetishize the act of invention. You can almost picture the workshops, tucked away in bustling city mews or quiet country towns. Imagine them, small and cluttered, dimly lit by a flickering gas, lamp or a grimy window. Tools are scattered across wooden benches, shavings curl on the floor, and strange, half-finished contraptions lie draped in canvas sheets, awaiting their moment of, well, if not glory, then at least hopeful unveiling. The Victorian inventor, as you picture him, and yes, it was overwhelmingly him, though women inventors certainly existed, their contributions often overlooked or patented under male names, is a figure of earnest dedication. He's perhaps a little ink-stained, a little singed from an experimental mishap, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tinkers with gears, levers, and springs. He's driven by a profound conviction that any problem, no matter how trivial, can be solved with a sufficiently ingenious arrangement of brass and mahogany. This was a time when the British Patent Office, for instance, saw an explosion in applications, a testament to this widespread inventive spirit. Between 1852, when the patent laws were reformed, and the end of the century, hundreds of thousands of patents were granted in Britain alone, covering everything from monumental engineering feats to, shall we say, devices of more questionable utility. It was as if a dam of creative and sometimes frankly bizarre thought had burst. The very air seemed thick with visions, ideas both brilliant and baffling, and vapors too. Not just the literal steam powering the new factories, but the more ethereal vapors of half-baked theories, of hopeful speculation, of solutions desperately seeking problems. You might stumble upon a device intended to mechanically turn the pages of a book for a bedridden reader, a noble idea, yet likely involving a precarious tower of clockwork that whirred ominously close to one's ear. Or perhaps an elaborate apparatus for warming a gentleman's shaving water to the precise, scientifically determined optimal temperature, a far cry from just splashing hot water from the kettle. These weren't necessarily born of cynical hucksterism, not always. Often, they sprang from a genuine, if sometimes misguided, desire to improve, to refine, to add a touch of mechanical sophistication to every facet of daily life. The line between genius and eccentricity was often delightfully blurred. One fascinating and rather quirky aspect of this inventive fervor was its occasional intersection with popular pseudosciences of the day. Phrenology, the belief that the shape and bumps on a person's skull could reveal their character and mental faculties, was remarkably popular. You can almost imagine an inventor, perhaps after a less than successful phrenological reading, devising a cranial conformator, a padded helmet with adjustable screws, designed to gently reshape a child's growing skull towards more virtuous protuberances. While perhaps not a mass-market success, such an idea would have felt perfectly logical to some within that particular intellectual climate. It's a reminder that inventions are always products of their time, reflecting not just its technological capabilities but also its prevailing beliefs, anxieties, and, yes, its fashionable follies. Historians still argue whether this proliferation of often superfluous gadgets was primarily driven by a genuine pursuit of progress, or if it was more a symptom of a society grappling with rapid change, seeking a sense of order and control through mechanism, even in the smallest, most personal domains. Were these inventors true visionaries, or were many simply captivated by the sheer joy of tinkering, of making something new, regardless of its ultimate practicality? Perhaps it was a blend of both. The sheer optimism of the age is palpable. There was a sense that humanity was on the cusp of mastering the natural world, and every new cogwheel, every patented improvement, was another small step in that grand, steam-powered march. You can almost hear the gentle whirring and clicking, sounds emanating from these Victorian workshops, the earnest explanations of inventors to skeptical but hopeful investors or family members. Imagine, my dear, a device that automatically butters your toast, ensuring an even spread every single time. The conviction in their voices is as much a part of the invention as the brass and wood. They weren't just building objects, they were building tiny pieces of a utopian, mechanically assisted future. A future where perhaps even the common housefly might be deterred by an automated, steam-powered fly swatter. A testament to man's ingenuity over minor irritations. The sheer volume of these ideas, the bewildering array of contraptions designed to solve problems you never knew you had, paints a picture of an age brimming with a charming, almost childlike faith in the power of gears and levers to perfect the human condition, one bewildering, often vaporous invention at a time. You drift now from the general hum of Victorian workshops into a more specific, somewhat rarefied atmosphere. The private chambers of the 19th century gentleman. Here, amidst the scent of bay rum, old leather, and perhaps a lingering trace of pipe tobacco, the inventive spirit we've been pondering takes on a distinctly masculine and often quite particular form. This is the domain of devices designed to maintain that impeccable, distinguished appearance, to streamline the rituals of a leisured life, or simply to appeal to a man's supposed fascination with all things mechanical, no matter how convoluted. Your gaze might fall first upon a rather substantial piece of furniture, often crafted from heavy oak or mahogany, standing silently in a corner. This is the trouser press, a common fixture in the well-to-do gentleman's dressing room. Imagine the ritual. At the end of the day, the carefully folded trousers, perhaps still faintly warm from wear, are placed between two flat boards. Then, with a satisfying turn of large wooden screws, pressure is applied, intended to restore a sharp crease and banish any unsightly wrinkles by morning. It's a straightforward concept, certainly more elegant than sleeping on them, a practice some less equipped bachelors were rumored to employ. Yet, there's a certain solemnity to its operation, a mechanical gravitas applied to the simple act of pressing pants. Some models became increasingly elaborate, with multiple compartments or patented spring mechanisms promising even greater pressing power, as if one were battling the very fabric of rumpledness with sheer engineering might. Did it save an immense amount of time compared to a valet's skilled ironing? The precise efficiency of these presses versus manual methods is still a subject of gentle debate among historians of domestic technology. Then consider the perilous journey of the morning shave. while the straight razor, honed to a fearsome sharpness on a leather strop, remained the standard. The allure of an automated, or at least mechanically assisted shave was a siren song for many inventors. You can almost picture the hopeful gentleman, perhaps still a little bleary-eyed, contemplating a new contraption. It might be a clockwork device, whirring with a contained frenzy, promising to guide the blade with unwavering precision. Or perhaps a miniature steam-powered shaver, hissing quietly as it warmed up, threatening to deliver not so much a close shave as a mild scalding if mishandled. The advertisements would have whispered of effortless grooming, of an end to nicks and cuts. The reality, one suspects, involved a fair amount of nervous trepidation and the occasional yelp. Indeed, the pursuit of the perfect, safe, and automated shave was a long and often frustrating one, with countless patents filed for devices that look, in retrospect, like miniature instruments of facial torture rather than grooming aids. It's a testament to the daily discomfort of traditional shaving that so much ingenuity was poured into finding an alternative, however unlikely. Beyond these major grooming challenges, a gentleman's dressing table or study might be cluttered with a host of smaller, equally dubious, yet charmingly earnest gadgets. Think of elaborate tie racks with complex rotating mechanisms, designed to display an entire cravat collection with the flick of a lever, or mechanical stud boxes that presented collar studs one at a time, lest the gentleman strain himself by actually picking one from a dish. For the smoker, there were self-igniting cigar cases, or intricate cigar cutters that not only snipped the end, but also, perhaps, pierced it in a scientifically approved pattern for optimal draw. A quirky but genuinely popular item was the moustache cup, a teacup with a small ceramic ledge built across part of the rim. This clever little barrier was designed to protect a gentleman's meticulously waxed and styled moustache from the ravages of steam or, heaven forbid, an accidental dunking into his tea or coffee. Its widespread adoption speaks volumes about the importance of maintaining that hirsute symbol of Victorian masculinity, and what of maintaining the gentlemanly physique. While organized sports were gaining popularity, the home was also seen as a potential gymnasium. You might find peculiar exercise contraptions, perhaps a system of pulleys and weights that promised to develop the chest, or spring-loaded dumbbells that offered resistance in supposedly novel ways. Often bulky and made of cast iron and leather, these devices spoke to the era's growing interest in physical culture, even if their actual biomechanical effectiveness was, shall we say, open to interpretation. The Victorian gentleman was expected to be robust, and if a machine could promise to assist in that robustness with minimal actual sweating or exertion, all the better. The rise of the middle class during the 19th century meant that more men aspired to the lifestyle and accoutrements of a gentleman, creating a larger market for such devices that signaled status and leisure, even if they weren't strictly necessary. These gadgets weren't just about function, they were about embodying an ideal, the ideal of the modern, efficient, and perfectly put-together man of leisure. They were conversation pieces, subtle displays of being up to date with the latest innovations. Owning a complex, perhaps slightly baffling trouser press or an automated tie selector wasn't just about convenience. It was about participating in the grand Victorian obsession with progress and mechanical solutions for every conceivable aspect of life. You can almost hear the quiet satisfaction, the subtle hum of masculine contentment, as these devices were demonstrated to envious friends, each whir and click a testament to a life made, if not significantly easier, then at least more interestingly complicated. Leaving the gentleman's private sanctum, you now drift quietly through the keyhole, as it were, and find yourself within the broader expanse of the 19th and early 20th century home. Here, in the heart of domesticity, the promise of invention shone brightly, offering visions of kitchens that ran themselves and parlors kept perpetually pristine with minimal human effort. Yet, as you observe the quiet corners and cluttered cupboards of these homesteads, you see where many of these domestic dreams ultimately unfurled into dusty disillusionment. The path to a seamlessly automated home was paved with good intentions and a remarkable number of wonderfully unhelpful contraptions. Imagine the kitchen, often the domain of a busy housewife or a harried domestic servant. Inventors, usually male, and perhaps not intimately familiar with the daily grind of cooking and cleaning, turn their minds to lightening the load. You might encounter an apple peeler of astonishing complexity, a symphony of gears and springs designed to remove the skin from an apple with a few turns of a crank. In theory, a marvel of efficiency. In practice, it probably took longer to set up, clean, and occasionally unjam than it did to peel several apples by hand with a simple knife. Similarly, mechanical egg beaters, often resembling miniature hand drills, promised fluffy meringues and perfectly emulsified sauces. Some were undeniably improvements over a simple whisk, but many were over-engineered, heavy, and prone to splattering batter in unexpected directions. The remnants of these well-meaning but ultimately cumbersome culinary tools often ended up relegated to the back of a deep drawer, their initial promise fading with each passing season. Then, there's the eternal battle against dust and dirt. Before the advent of the electric vacuum cleaner, itself a product of many earlier, less successful attempts, including manually pumped versions that required 2 people to operate, inventors dreamed up all sorts of mechanical sweeping devices. Picture a carpet sweeper that looks less like a cleaning tool and more like a small wheeled plow, its brushes driven by the motion of pushing it across the floor. Some might have incorporated bellows to puff air, theoretically dislodging dirt, but more likely just redistributing it. The quiet sigh of resignation from the person wielding such a device is almost audible. One quirky invention that gained some traction was the pneumatic carpet renovator, which often involved a hand-pumped bellows system connected to a nozzle. While a step towards vacuuming, these manual devices were often exhausting to use and only marginally effective. It's a testament to the drudgery of housework that even slightly improved, though still flawed, inventions were embraced with some hope. In the laundry room, or perhaps the scullery, you'd find attempts to mechanize the arduous task of washing clothes. Early washing machines were often wooden tubs with hand-cranked agitators or dollies that pounded and sloshed the clothes. They saved some scrubbing, perhaps, but required significant physical effort and often leaked profusely. Wringers, with their heavy rubber rollers and large cranks, were a common attachment, designed to squeeze water from the sodden garments. While better than hand-wringing, they were notorious for catching fingers and buttons. The dream of just loading clothes and walking away was still a distant, almost unimaginable fantasy. Historians often note that while many domestic inventions aimed to save labor, they sometimes simply shifted the type of labor required, or increased the expected standards of cleanliness, meaning the overall workload for women didn't necessarily decrease as much as one might imagine. Consider, too, the more specialized niche inventions that promise to solve very specific household problems. A silent butler, not a person, but a small, lidded pan on a handle, designed to sweep crumbs from the tablecloth directly into its waiting maw. A charming idea, certainly more elegant than brushing crumbs onto the floor, but perhaps not an essential piece of household equipment. Or what about the self-rocking cradle, powered by clockwork, or even, in some ambitious designs, by small steam engines? One shudders to think. The intention was to soothe a fretful baby, freeing up a mother's or nurse's hands. The reality might have been a periodically jerky motion or the unsettling sound of grinding gears accompanying a lullaby. The precise impact of these domestic gadgets on family life and household management remains a subject of ongoing research, as their adoption varied greatly by social class and geographic location. These homestead humbugs weren't necessarily bad ideas in principle. Many were ingenious for their time, representing genuine attempts to apply mechanical principles to everyday tasks. But they often suffered from a lack of robust materials, an incomplete understanding of ergonomics, or simply an overestimation of the average household's desire for complex machinery to perform simple tasks. They gathered dust not because they were evil, but because they were, in the end, just not quite helpful enough to justify their expense, their bulk, or the effort required to maintain them. You can see them now, tucked away in attics and basements, their springs rusted, their wooden frames warped, quiet monuments to domestic dreams that, while perhaps not entirely unfurled, certainly drooped a little under the weight of their own unfulfilled promises. The scent of lemon oil and old linen in these imagined homes is now tinged with the faintest metallic aroma of these forgotten helpers. You feel yourself drifting now from the relatively benign clutter of the domestic sphere into a realm altogether, more shadowy, a place where hope and desperation intertwine with often audacious claims. We are gently tiptoeing into the murky, fascinating world of quackery and cure-alls, the domain of patent medicines and health inventions that whispered, seductive promises of miraculous yet almost invariably elusive cures. The air here seems heavier, tinged with the scent of exotic herbs, mysterious chemical concoctions, and the faint metallic tang of electricity, all underpinned by the subtle aroma of printer's ink from the ceaseless barrage of advertisements. Imagine the late 19th and early 20th centuries, an era before stringent medical regulation, before the Food and Drug Administration held significant power. It was a golden age for the self-proclaimed medical genius, the charismatic charlatan, and the well-meaning but dangerously misguided inventor of health-giving apparatus. People suffered from ailments both real and imagined, and orthodox medicine, while advancing, still had many limitations. This created a fertile ground for anyone offering a quick, easy, and often sensationally marketed solution. The patent panacea problem wasn't just a minor nuisance, it was a widespread phenomenon, preying on the anxieties and hopes of a populace eager for relief. You might see advertisements in newspapers and magazines, or vividly printed posters pasted on city walls and rural fences. They proclaim the wonders of Dr. Feelgood's electric corset, guaranteed to cure nervousness, indigestion, and a general lack of vigor by subtly electrifying the wearer's torso. Or perhaps Professor Mysterio's magnetic insoles, which promise to draw out disease and restore youthful energy by aligning the body's natural magnetic fields. These weren't just pills and potions. The inventive spirit we've encountered extended enthusiastically into the realm of therapeutic devices. You could purchase electric belts, vibrating chairs, health rays emitted from curious lamps, and all manner of contraptions designed to stimulate, soothe, or realign some poorly understood bodily system. The descriptions were often couched in pseudo-scientific jargon, invoking electricity, magnetism, or newly discovered rays to lend an air of cutting-edge legitimacy. Consider the sheer audacity of some of these claims. A simple bottle of tonic, often containing a high percentage of alcohol, perhaps some opiates, and a blend of harmless or not so harmless vegetable extracts, might be advertised as a cure for everything from consumption, tuberculosis, to baldness, from a child's teething pains to a farmer's lumbago. The mainstream historical fact here is the incredible prevalence of such nostrums. Products like Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound, for instance, became household names, marketed heavily towards women for female complaints. Its success, built on shrewd advertising and a relatable grandmotherly persona, despite its often questioned medicinal value. These concoctions offered a fleeting sense of well-being, often due to their alcoholic content, creating a cycle of reliance that could be mistaken for a cure. Then there were the more elaborate mechanical cures. Imagine a violet ray machine, a popular device from the early 20th century. It consisted of a disruptive discharge coil that produced high voltage, high frequency, low current electricity, which was then applied to the body through various glass electrode attachments. These electrodes would glow with a purplish light, hence the name. Proponents claimed it could treat almost any ailment imaginable, from acne and asthma to cancer and paralysis, by supposedly ozonizing the blood and stimulating cellular activity. While perhaps providing a tingling sensation, their actual therapeutic benefit for most of these conditions was negligible, if not entirely absent. Yet they were sold widely, found in homes and even some doctors' offices, a testament to the era's fascination with electricity and its perceived medical potential. A quirky tidbit is that some of these violet ray devices are now collector's items, valued more for their antique aesthetic and historical curiosity than for any health benefits. The line between legitimate medical experimentation and outright quackery was often incredibly blurry. Some inventors and promoters may have genuinely believed in their creations, while others were undoubtedly cynical opportunists. It's a subject of debate how much harm was directly caused by these patent panaceas. While some contained dangerous ingredients like mercury or arsenic in small doses, many were simply inert, their main danger lying in the false hope they offered, potentially diverting individuals from seeking more effective, conventional treatments. The power of placebo, amplified by persuasive marketing and striking testimonials, often fabricated or heavily embellished, cannot be underestimated. You can almost feel the quiet desperation of someone purchasing one of these devices or bottles, clinging to the hope that this time, this invention, this potion, would be the one to alleviate their suffering or the suffering of a loved one. The huckster's hushed hype, which we'll explore more later, played a crucial role here, weaving tales of miraculous recoveries and scientific breakthroughs. The patent medicine trade was a massive industry, generating fortunes for its proprietors. It thrived in the absence of robust regulation and in the presence of a public often poorly educated in matters of health and science, yet deeply yearning for solutions. As you drift through this era of hopeful elixirs and shocking belts, you sense the vulnerability, the earnest desire for wellness that made so many susceptible to the alluring whispers of these often bizarre and sometimes dangerous cures. Leaving behind the often unsettling aura of patent medicines and dubious health contraptions, you now find yourself drifting into a somewhat lighter, though no less perplexing, realm, the world of fashion. Here, amidst the rustle of silk, the creak of whalebone, and the scent of lavender and mothballs, ingenuity was applied not just to improve function, but to achieve a fleeting ideal of style, to signal status, or sometimes just for the sheer perplexing novelty of it all. It's time to unlace your metaphorical corsets and calmly examine some of the peculiar sartorial inventions that graced, or perhaps burdened, the human form in days gone by. The Victorian era, in particular, was a hotbed of elaborate and often restrictive clothing for both men and women, and with such complexity came a host of inventive solutions to perceived problems. Consider the corset itself, a defining garment for women for centuries, reaching its zenith of constriction in the 19th century. While not an invention in the sudden sense, its evolution involved continuous tinkering and refinement. Patents were granted for new bust designs, lacing systems, and materials, all aimed at achieving that coveted hourglass figure, sometimes with alarming disregard for internal anatomy. Then came inventions designed to mitigate the corset's discomfort or to enhance its effects. You might find ventilated corsets with strategically placed holes, or even electric corsets, echoing the health fads we just encountered, claiming to tone the figure through gentle currents while also cinching the waist. But beyond the foundational garments, fashion's fleeting fancies spurred a host of more whimsical and often wonderfully useless creations. Take, for example, the dress elevator or skirt lifter. In an age of voluminous skirts that dragged on dusty, muddy streets, ladies needed a way to hoist their hemlines gracefully. These devices, often charmingly ornate clips or clasps attached to a chain or cord, allowed a woman to subtly lift her skirts when navigating treacherous terrain. While practical to a degree, some became incredibly elaborate, miniature marvels of engineering designed more for show than sheer utility. You can almost picture a lady of fashion fumbling with a particularly complex model, its tiny gears perhaps snagging on her delicate lace. For men, while their attire was generally less overtly flamboyant than women's during certain periods, there were still opportunities for sartorial inventiveness. Consider the detachable collar and cuffs. This was a mainstream historical fact of immense practicality. It allowed a man to present a clean, crisp appearance without having to launder the entire shirt daily. Shirts themselves were often seen as undergarments. However, keeping these detachable items perfectly in place led to various patented clips, studs, and fasteners, some fiendishly complicated. Imagine wrestling with a collar stud that refuses to cooperate moments before an important engagement. And then there were devices designed to achieve the perfect cravat knot, mechanical guides or pre-formed frames. promising a flawless bow or knot every time, though perhaps sacrificing any semblance of natural sprezzatura. The early 20th century, while heralding some simplification in dress, still saw its share of peculiar fashion inventions. One quirky example is the hobble skirt, which became fashionable just before World War I. These skirts were incredibly narrow at the ankles, severely restricting a woman's stride. To aid locomotion, or perhaps just to further accentuate the look, some designers or inventors proposed peculiar accessories, like narrow straps connecting the ankles to enforce a tiny gait, or even, in jest, small wheels attached to shoes. While perhaps not widespread, such notions illustrate the extremes to which fashion could push practicality. The very existence of the hobble skirt led to debates about female mobility and its social implications. It certainly wasn't designed for an active life. Historians still debate the primary drivers behind such often impractical fashion inventions. Was it purely aesthetic experimentation by designers? Was it driven by consumers seeking novelty and distinction? Or were there deeper social and cultural currents at play, reflecting changing gender roles, social aspirations, or even anxieties? The fleeting nature of fashion meant that many of these inventions had a very short lifespan, appearing for a season or two before vanishing into obscurity, only to be rediscovered by bemused costume historians. You might also encounter inventions aimed at protecting elaborate hairstyles. Think of rain hoods of oiled silk that could be deployed from a small pouch, or even more structured coiffure protectors resembling miniature, transparent cages, designed to shield a lady's carefully arranged curls and towering hairpieces from the elements. And for those moments of repose, special pillows were designed with cutouts to preserve a hairstyle overnight, a far cry from simply letting one's hair down. There was also the rather niche but amusing eyelash curler, which, while a staple today, appeared in various slightly alarming early forms, promising to give that coveted doe-eyed look through mechanical means that sometimes looked more like tiny instruments of optical interrogation. As you drift through these visions of past fashions, from the tightly laced waists to the precariously balanced hats and constricting hemlines, you see a world where the desire to conform to an aesthetic, ideal, or to stand out through novelty often trumped comfort and common sense. These sartorial absurdities, these fleeting fancies captured in brass, whalebone, and silk, are gentle reminders that the pursuit of looking a certain way has long inspired a particularly inventive, if sometimes perplexing, kind of human creativity. The rustle of these forgotten garments whispers tales of aspiration, of societal expectation, and of the charming, sometimes comical, lengths to which people would go for the sake of style. You feel the scene shifting once more, the scent of mothballs and old lace giving way to the faint aroma of oil, steam, and perhaps a whiff of exhaust fumes, though not quite the kind you're accustomed to. We are now considering the often bumpy, sometimes bizarre, and frequently frustrating world of early attempts to revolutionize personal travel. Long before the smooth, reliable hum of the modern automobile became ubiquitous, the path to getting from A to B was littered with wheels of whimsy, strange and often unworkable transportation trials and tribulations. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a ferment of experimentation in personal mobility. The bicycle had already made a huge impact, liberating individuals and changing social dynamics. But the dream of powered personal transport, something beyond the horse or the pedal, captivated inventors. You can almost hear the clatter and hiss of experimental engines, the hopeful pronouncements of breakthroughs, and the occasional ignominious sputter of failure. This wasn't just about speed, it was about conquering distance, about achieving a new kind of freedom. Consider the very early horseless carriages. Before the familiar internal combustion engine gained dominance, inventors experimented with all sorts of power sources. Steam-powered cars, for instance, were among the first to appear. Imagine the scene: a ponderous vehicle, essentially a small locomotive on road wheels, belching smoke and steam, requiring a considerable amount of time to build up pressure before it could even move. They were noisy, often dirty, and required a fair degree of engineering knowledge to operate and maintain. While some were technically successful, like those produced by the Stanley Motor Carriage Company, a mainstream historical fact, Stanley steamers were, for a time, among the fastest cars in the world, one even setting a land speed record in 1906. Their complexity and the constant need for water ultimately limited their appeal for the average user. Then there were the electric vehicles. Yes, electric cars appeared very early in automotive history, around the turn of the 20th century. They were quiet, clean, and relatively easy to operate compared to their steam or gasoline counterparts. You might picture a dignified lady silently gliding through a city park in her elegant electric runabout. However, they suffered from limited range and long recharging times, issues that, amusingly, still challenge electric vehicle technology. Today, though, to a much lesser extent. The infrastructure for widespread battery charging simply didn't exist, and batteries themselves were heavy and inefficient. So, while offering a glimpse of a cleaner future, they remained largely urban novelties. But the real whimsy often lay in the more outlandish attempts at personal transport. Picture the monowheel, a vehicle where the rider, and sometimes a passenger, sat inside a single large hoop-like wheel, often powered by a small engine. Steering was notoriously difficult. Stability was precarious at best, and the view for the driver was often compromised. While some functional prototypes were built and patents abound, the monowheel never quite caught on. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it remains a curious footnote in transportation history, a testament to the "if it's round, can we ride in it" school of thought. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that inventors were still patenting designs for monowheels well into the mid-20th century, showing the persistence of this rather eccentric idea. And what about taking to the skies, or at least attempting to, before the Wright brothers' successful sustained flight? The desire for personal aerial conveyance led to some truly remarkable, if ultimately doomed, contraptions. Ornithopters, machines designed to fly by flapping wings like a bird, occupied the dreams of many inventors. Leonardo da Vinci famously sketched such devices, and centuries later, inventors were still building full-scale models, often powered by human muscle or small, underpowered engines. You can imagine the scene: an inventor, perched precariously in a feather and wood contraption, pedaling furiously or frantically working levers, only to achieve a hopeful hop, or more likely, a rapid, undignified descent. The dream of personal flight was powerful, but the engineering challenges were immense. Even on the ground, the quest for alternatives to traditional wheels continued. There were experiments with walking machines, mechanical legs designed to propel a vehicle, theoretically capable of traversing rough terrain. These often looked like metallic insects, their movements jerky and complex. And then there were various attempts to combine different modes of transport, like amphibious bicycles or cars with attachable wings, promising to seamlessly transition from road to water or even to a brief terrifying glide. Historians still discuss the precise turning points that led to the dominance of the internal combustion engine and the conventional four-wheeled automobile, given the sheer variety of alternatives explored. Was it purely technological superiority, or were economic factors, infrastructure development, and even cultural preferences equally important? As you survey this landscape of transportation trials, you see more than just failed machines. You see a restless human spirit, an unwillingness to accept the limitations of the current means of travel. Each clunky steam car, each wobbly monowheel, each failed ornithopter represents a bold, if sometimes misguided, step towards the future. The road to our modern, relatively effortless mobility was paved with these experiments, these wheeled and sometimes winged whimsies. You can almost smell the optimism, the faint scent of scorched oil, and hear the distant, hopeful chug of an engine that might, just might, change the world, or at least get you to the next town without too many breakdowns. The clatter of experimental engines fades, and you find yourself drifting into a quieter, though no less cluttered, environment. The air now smells of old paper, ink, and perhaps the faint metallic tang of early office machinery. You're shuffling gently through the archives of past workplace innovations, peering into the cluttered cubicles and dimly lit counting houses of yesteryear. Here, the pursuit of efficiency and organization spurred a host of peculiar gadgets and systems, all promising to streamline the workday, but often delivering only head-scratching complexity and a new set of frustrations. Imagine the office of the late 19th or early 20th century. The typewriter is becoming established, a revolutionary invention in its own right, but around it, a constellation of supporting gadgets begins to appear. You might see an automatic eraser, a small, mechanical device, perhaps spring-loaded or clockwork-driven, designed to rub out mistakes on a typed page with supposed precision. In reality, it might have been just as prone to smudging or tearing the paper as a careful human hand, only with more moving parts to go wrong. Then there are the various forms of copying presses used before the advent of carbon paper and photocopiers. These often involved dampened tissue paper and immense screw presses, a laborious process to create a handful of smudged, barely legible copies. Each turn of the press was a testament to the desire for duplication, even if the results were often less than pristine. Consider the intricate filing systems that were devised. While systematic record-keeping was essential for growing businesses, some of the proposed solutions were labyrinthine. You might encounter elaborate rotary filing cabinets looking like miniature Ferris wheels for index cards, or complex color-coded and cross-reference systems that required a dedicated clerk just to understand, let alone operate. The promise was instant access to any piece of information. The reality was often a frustrating search through a maze of tabs and drawers. The mainstream historical fact is that the late 19th century saw the rise of scientific management spearheaded by figures like Frederick Winslow Taylor, which emphasized efficiency and the systematic analysis of workflows. This philosophy undoubtedly spurred the invention of many office tools, as businesses sought to optimize every aspect of their operations. Then there were the communication devices. Beyond the already established telegraph and the nascent telephone, you might find pneumatic tube systems in larger offices, whisking messages and small items between departments in cylindrical canisters, propelled by compressed air or vacuum. While undeniably cool and visually quite striking with their network of brass tubes, they were expensive to install and maintain. For internal memos, before widespread typewriting, some offices employed polygraphs or other mechanical writing duplicators, complex contraptions of hinged arms and multiple pens designed to create several copies of a handwritten document simultaneously. The resulting script was often wobbly and difficult to read. A particularly quirky area of office invention was the attempt to combat idleness or ensure employee honesty. You might find time recording clocks that required employees to punch a card, not just upon arrival and departure, but perhaps at various intervals throughout the day, creating a minute-by-minute record of their presence or absence from their workstation. Some even more elaborate systems proposed managerial observation desks with periscopes or strategically placed mirrors, allowing a supervisor to discreetly monitor the activity in the office, a rather unsettling vision of workplace surveillance even by today's standards. The psychological impact of such overtly mistrustful innovations on employee morale is something historians of business management still ponder. And what of the calculating machines? Before electronic calculators and computers, arithmetic was a laborious task. Mechanical adding machines, like the comptometer or the Burroughs adding machine, were significant innovations. Complex arrangements of gears, levers, and keys that could perform addition and sometimes subtraction with remarkable speed and accuracy for their time. However, they were often heavy, noisy, and required specialized training to operate proficiently. Their intricate inner workings, a dense forest of precisely machined metal parts, were a marvel of engineering, but also a nightmare if something went wrong. You can almost hear the rhythmic clatter and cheeching of these machines in a busy accounts office, a soundtrack to the burgeoning world of commerce. There were also countless smaller desk accessories, each promising a tiny increment of efficiency. Automatic page turners for ledgers, specialized rulers for drawing complex tables, stamp moisteners that ranged from simple sponges in a dish to more elaborate roller devices, and pen wipers of every conceivable design. Each item represented a focused attempt to solve a very specific, often minor inconvenience of office life. The debate among scholars often revolves around whether these myriad small inventions genuinely contributed to overall productivity or simply added to the clutter and mental load of the office worker, who had to learn to use and maintain them. As you drift through these imagined offices of old, you see a landscape of earnest endeavor, a battlefield where humanity waged war against inefficiency with an arsenal of often clunky, occasionally ingenious, and sometimes downright bewildering mechanical aids. The pursuit of the perfectly organized desk, the instantly retrievable file, the flawlessly calculated sum, led to a fascinating array of office oddities. The quiet rustle of paper is punctuated by the imagined clicks, whirs, and k-thunks of these forgotten tools, each one a whisper of a workday past, a testament to the enduring human quest to make work just a little bit less work. The faint, metallic scent of old office machines and stale ink begins to dissipate, replaced now by a lighter, perhaps slightly musty aroma of old wood, fabric, and perhaps a hint of something sweet, like forgotten candy. You find yourself tiptoeing softly into the nurseries and playrooms of the past, ready to rummage gently through the toy chests of history. Here, amongst the well-loved dolls and worn-out teddy bears, we uncover a curious collection of childhood curiosities, gadgets and gizmos that perhaps baffled young minds more than they genuinely entertained, or aimed to educate in wonderfully roundabout ways. The Victorian and Edwardian eras, with their growing middle class and increased focus on childhood as a distinct phase of life, saw a proliferation of manufactured toys. And just as with adult gadgets, the inventive spirit was keen to produce novelties for the younger generation. You might imagine a clockwork acrobat, a tin toy that, when wound up, would perform a series of jerky, repetitive tumbles on a miniature trapeze. While momentarily diverting, its limited repertoire might have quickly lost its charm for a child craving more imaginative play. Or consider the magic lantern, a precursor to the slide projector. This was genuinely a source of wonder, projecting hand-painted glass slides onto a wall, illustrating fairy tales, geographical scenes, or moral lessons. However, operating it, with its often smoky oil lamp and fiddly slide mechanism, could be a delicate and sometimes frustrating affair for little hands. Then there were the educational toys, designed not just for amusement, but to subtly instill knowledge or virtuous habits. You might find a geography game that involved moving tiny flags across a map according to the roll of a dice, perhaps with cards detailing exports or capitals. While well-intentioned, the fun factor might have been somewhat overwhelmed by the didactic purpose. A mainstream historical fact is that educational reformers like Friedrich Froebel, the inventor of kindergarten, heavily influenced toy design, promoting gifts, sets of blocks and other manipulative materials, intended to teach children about form, number, and spatial relationships through play. This philosophy spurred many toys that aimed for a blend of entertainment and instruction. Some childhood curiosities were simply scaled-down versions of adult technologies, reflecting the era's fascination with progress. Miniature steam engines, fully functional and capable of powering tiny pulleys or spinning wheels, were popular, though they required adult supervision due to the live steam and open flames. These were less toys in the cuddly sense and more like junior engineering kits. You can almost smell the hot oil and hear the gentle hiss, a sound that probably thrilled some mechanically minded children while perhaps slightly intimidating others. There were also toy telegraph sets, allowing children to tap out Morse code messages between rooms, a playful introduction to the wonders of modern communication. A particularly quirky category involved toys that aimed to mimic or teach very specific, adult-like skills. Consider a miniature shopkeeping set, complete with tiny scales, imitation coins, and packaged goods. Or a toy printing press that allowed children to set tiny rubber type and print their own calling cards or miniature newspapers. While these fostered role-playing, the complexity or fiddliness of some of these sets might have tested a child's patience. One can imagine a child more interested in using the tiny artificial vegetables from the shop set as projectiles than in meticulously calculating pretend profits. The debate among child development experts then, as now, often centered on the ideal balance between structured, didactic play and free, imaginative exploration. Did these highly specific toys channel creativity or constrain it? And what of the truly peculiar? You might encounter a crying doll whose mechanism for producing a wail was more alarming than endearing, or a walking doll that moved with a stiff, unnerving gait, its painted eyes staring fixedly ahead. There were also novelty toys based on fleeting crazes, like the Diabolo, a sort of yo-yo on a string and two sticks that enjoyed immense though brief popularity in the early 1900s, its mastery requiring considerable dexterity that perhaps eluded many younger children. Or consider the singing bird automaton, often a beautifully crafted, expensive item, where a tiny feathered bird in a cage would mechanically chirp and move its beak. While a marvel of clockwork, its interactive potential was limited. The materials themselves tell a story. Wood, tin, lead, before its dangers were fully understood for toys. Porcelain and early plastics like celluloid. These give the toys a certain tangible history, a sense of the era's manufacturing capabilities. You might even find toys designed to encourage good posture, perhaps a rather stern-looking doll that could only sit bolt upright, or a game that somehow penalized slouching. The anxieties and aspirations of the adult world often found their way into the toy chest, sometimes in rather unsubtle forms. As you gently sift through these playthings of peculiarity, you're reminded that childhood, while a universal experience, is also shaped by the culture and technology of its time. These gadgets and gizmos, some charming, some baffling, some genuinely educational, and some just plain odd, reflect what adults thought children should play with, or what they believed would amuse or improve them. The faint echoes of children's laughter, frustration, and perhaps quiet bewilderment seem to cling to these old toys, whispering tales of playtime in a world that was itself rapidly changing, trying to invent its way to a brighter, or at least more mechanically interesting, future for its youngest citizens. The playful, if sometimes perplexing echoes of the nursery fade, and you find yourself drawn towards a quieter, more introspective space. The air here is filled with the scent of old books, perhaps a hint of herbal remedies, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of hopeful aspiration. We are delving now into the timeless, sleepy appeal of Inventions, promising effortless self-betterment, the better you blueprint that humanity has perpetually sought, often through the acquisition of curious contraptions and questionable schemes. This yearning for self-improvement is, of course, as old as self-awareness, but the 19th and early 20th centuries, with their burgeoning middle class, increased leisure time for some, and a prevailing belief in progress and personal perfectibility, saw a particular flourishing of gadgets and regimens designed to enhance one's physical, mental, or moral capacities with, ideally, minimal actual effort. You can almost feel the gentle pull of these promises, the seductive whisper that a better version of yourself is just one purchase away. Consider the myriad devices aimed at correcting posture. In an era where an upright, dignified bearing was highly valued, slouching was seen not just as unsightly, but as a sign of poor character or ill health. You might encounter elaborate shoulder braces made of leather and steel, designed to physically pull the wearer into an erect position. Or perhaps spinal supporters that resembled miniature corsets, promising to align the vertebrae and promote a graceful carriage. Some inventors even proposed posture alarms, small devices that would buzz or click if the wearer slumped, a constant nagging reminder to sit up straight. Imagine the quiet discomfort, the subtle pressure of these contraptions worn beneath. Clothing, a secret battle waged against the natural human tendency to relax. Then there was the pursuit of intellectual enhancement. While education was expanding, the idea of boosting brain power through mechanical or passive means held a powerful allure. You might find memory improvement systems that involved complex mnemonic charts or peculiar headbands infused with, supposedly, brain-stimulating minerals. Or concentration aids, perhaps a set of blinders to limit peripheral vision, or even devices that emitted a monotonous sound, theoretically lulling the brain into a state of heightened focus. One rather quirky invention that appeared in various forms was the phrenological self-examiner, a helmet-like device with adjustable pointers, allowing individuals to map the bumps on their own skulls and, presumably, identify areas of intellectual strength or weakness to be cultivated, perhaps through specific mental exercises, or by wearing a different, brain-enhancing band over the desired faculty. The notion that you could simply strap on a device and become more intelligent is a testament to the era's faith in mechanical solutions, even for the complexities of the human mind. Physical self-improvement, beyond the gentleman's exercise. Machines we touched upon earlier also saw its share of peculiar inventions. For those seeking to enhance their physique without the strain of actual exercise, there were passive exercise machines. Imagine contraptions with vibrating belts, designed to jiggle away unwanted fat, or rollers that promise to smooth and tone muscles with no exertion on the part of the user. Advertisements would show effortlessly slim and vigorous individuals, attributing their perfection to these miraculous devices. The reality, of course, was that no amount of gentle vibration could substitute for diet and genuine physical activity. This desire for an easy path to a better body is, as you know, a theme that echoes loudly even today. The mainstream historical fact is that the physical culture movement, which gained enormous popularity in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with figures like Eugen Sandow, promoted exercise and healthy living, but also inadvertently created a market for less strenuous, gadget-based shortcuts to similar ideals. And what about improving one's character or social graces? While perhaps harder to mechanize, inventors still tried. You might find conversation aids, small booklets, or even mechanical prompters with lists of witty remarks or appropriate responses for various social situations, or devices designed to cultivate a pleasing expression, perhaps involving gentle facial massage or even mild electrical stimulation, promising to banish frown lines and encourage a perpetual, serene smile. The idea that charm or virtue could be acquired or enhanced through an external apparatus speaks to a deep-seated desire for self-acceptance and social success. Historians often debate the extent to which these self-improvement schemes reflected genuine anxieties about social mobility and personal adequacy in a rapidly changing society, versus simply being clever marketing of human insecurities. The advertisements for these Better You blueprints were key. They often featured dramatic before and after illustrations, heartfelt, if likely fabricated, testimonials, and promises of transformative results with minimal disruption to one's daily life. They tapped into a universal longing to be stronger, smarter, more attractive, more poised, more successful. The allure wasn't just in the device itself, but in the vision of the improved self it promised to unlock. You can almost feel the quiet hopefulness of someone ordering a posture corrector or a brain-enhancing band, the desire to finally overcome a perceived personal failing, to step into a brighter, more confident future. As you drift through this realm of self-improvement schemes, you recognize a persistent human trait: the search for a simple fix, a tangible tool to achieve intangible goals. These curious posture correctors, questionable brain-enhancing bands, and effortless exercises are quiet monuments to that enduring, sleepy appeal of becoming a better version of ourselves. Ideally, while we're not trying too hard. The gentle hum of these forgotten aids is a soft reminder of our perpetual and often charmingly optimistic quest for personal perfection. The introspective quiet of self-improvement schemes gives way to a more bustling, aromatic, and occasionally chaotic scene. You find yourself drifting towards the heart of the home once more, but this time, specifically into the kitchen. The air is thick with the phantom scents of baking bread, simmering stews, and perhaps the faint, acrid smell of something that didn't quite turn out as planned. We are here to slowly stir the pot of kitchen history, uncovering culinary contraptions of confusion, gadgets that aim to simplify the path to dinner, but often just added more steps, more clutter, and more opportunities for things to go wonderfully, if frustratingly, awry. The kitchen, even in bygone eras, was a laboratory of sorts, a place of transformation where raw ingredients became sustenance. And like any lab, it attracted inventors eager to streamline processes and introduce scientific efficiency. But the path from ingenious idea to genuinely helpful kitchen tool was often a very winding one. You might encounter, for instance, a self-straining saucepan, designed with a perforated lid or a tilting mechanism that promised to effortlessly separate liquids from solids. Imagine the cook, hopefully tipping the pan, only to find half the peas escaping along with the water, or the mechanism jamming at a crucial moment. While the intention was good, to avoid the fuss of a separate colander, the execution often left something to be desired. Then there were the specialized choppers and slicers for every conceivable fruit and vegetable. We've already touched on the complex apple peeler, but imagine dedicated devices for dicing onions, promising tear-free chopping, but perhaps requiring more effort to clean than a simple knife, for creating perfectly uniform potato slices, or for coring and segmenting pineapples with a single, impressive-looking thrust. Each of these tools often involved multiple parts, sharp blades in unexpected places, and a learning curve that might have made even the most patient cook sigh. The dream was a perfectly prepped ingredient. The reality was often a countertop, littered with bits of food and a gadget that defied easy reassembly. One particularly quirky, though perhaps not entirely useless invention, was the pea sheller, a small hand-cranked device that promised to liberate peas from their pods with mechanical efficiency. For someone facing a mountain of fresh peas, it might have seemed like a godsend, though its effectiveness likely varied with the plumpness and uniformity of the pods. Bread making, a fundamental kitchen task, also attracted its share of inventive attention. Before electric mixers and bread machines, you might find dough kneaders that were essentially sturdy buckets with complex crank-operated paddles or hooks. The idea was to save the cook the laborious task of hand kneading. While some models might have been moderately successful, they were often bulky, difficult to clean, and required significant manual effort to operate the crank, merely shifting the exertion rather than eliminating it. The texture of the resulting bread, compared to that produced by skilled hands, is a matter that culinary historians might gently debate. Did these mechanical kneaders truly replicate the artistry of the human touch, or did they produce a more utilitarian, if less soulful, loaf? And what about the art of beverage preparation? Coffee and tea, staples in many households, saw numerous attempts at improved brewing methods. You might find elaborate, multi-chambered coffee percolators that looked more like chemistry experiments, promising the perfect extraction, but often delivering a beverage that was either too weak or too bitter. Or automatic tea makers that, in their early non-electric forms, might involve a clockwork mechanism to lower a tea ball into hot water at a preset time. A charming, if somewhat over-engineered solution to making a morning cuppa. The quest for the perfect brew, as you know, continues to this day, with an ever-evolving array of gadgets. Even serving food wasn't immune to the call of unnecessary invention. Consider the toast rack, a common item, yes, but some designs became incredibly elaborate, with individual spring-loaded slots or warming elements of dubious effectiveness. Or butter curlers and radish roses, small tools designed to transform simple ingredients into decorative, if somewhat fussy, garnishes. These spoke to an aspiration for elegance and presentation, even if the effort involved seemed disproportionate to the outcome. The mainstream historical fact is that the Victorian and Edwardian eras saw a rise in elaborate dining rituals and multi-course meals, particularly among the affluent, which in turn fueled the desire for specialized serving implements and decorative food preparation tools. These kitchen cataclysms weren't always about complete failure. Some gadgets had a kernel of a good idea, but were let down by the materials of the time, the manufacturing capabilities, or a lack of understanding of the true needs and workflows of the home cook. They represent a kind of hopeful over-engineering, a belief that any task, no matter how simple, could be improved with a few more gears, levers, or specialized blades. You can almost hear the clatter of these devices, the frustrated sighs, the occasional exclamation of, "Oh, bother," as a contraption designed to simplify only complicates. The kitchen, a place of warmth and nourishment, also became a quiet repository for these well-intentioned but ultimately confusing culinary tools, each one a testament to the enduring and sometimes baffling human desire to innovate our way to an easier meal. The scent of slightly bewildered culinary efforts fades, and you find yourself drawn into a different kind of atmosphere altogether. It's an atmosphere thick with the power of persuasion, the gentle cadence of convincing prose, and the almost palpable hum of human desire being skillfully stoked. We are now exploring the hushed, yet incredibly potent world of the hucksters. Hype, uncovering the masterful marketing and softly spoken promises that convince sensible people, much like yourself, to acquire utterly nonsensical, or at least profoundly unnecessary, items. This isn't just about the invention itself, but the art of making it irresistible. Imagine the printed page of a late 19th or early 20th century newspaper or magazine. Amongst the news articles and serialized fiction, you find them. The advertisements. These weren't the slick minimalist ads you might be used to today. Often they were dense blocks of text, filled with elaborate descriptions, earnest appeals, and sometimes astonishing claims. The language was frequently ornate, employing a vocabulary designed to impress and reassure. An electric belt wasn't just a belt, it was a galvanic marvel, a fount of vital energy, a scientific miracle. A simple kitchen gadget wouldn't just chop vegetables, it would emancipate the housewife from culinary drudgery, ushering in a new era of kitchen tranquility. The copywriters of the day were masters of painting vivid pictures with words, tapping into the anxieties, aspirations, and dreams of their audience. Testimonials were a cornerstone of this persuasive art. Mrs. Higgins of Topeka, Kansas writes, "Since acquiring the patent posture corrector, my lumbago has vanished. My children respect me more, and my geraniums have never looked better." These endorsements, often of dubious authenticity or wildly exaggerated, provided social proof, suggesting that others, just like you, had found success and happiness through this particular product. The sheer volume of such testimonials could create a powerful impression of widespread satisfaction and efficacy, even for the most outlandish items. You can almost hear the quiet rustle of a newspaper as a reader, perhaps suffering from that very same lumbago, pauses, a flicker of hope ignited by Mrs. Higgins's purported triumph. Illustrations also played a crucial role. Before photography became commonplace in advertising, detailed engravings would depict the invention in its most flattering light. Happy, vibrant people would be shown effortlessly using the device, their faces radiating contentment. Before and after pictures were particularly potent, showcasing a miraculous transformation from a state of misery or inefficiency to one of blissful perfection. A stooped, unhappy individual would be contrasted with an upright, smiling paragon of health, all thanks to Dr. Quackenbush's spinal rejuvenator. These images bypassed rational thought and appealed directly to the emotions, to the desire for a similar transformation. The huckster often adopted a persona of authority and benevolence. They weren't just selling a product, they were offering a solution, a service, a helping hand. Titles like professor, doctor, often self-bestowed, or inventor, lent an air of expertise and trustworthiness. The language used might be paternalistic, reassuring the reader that their problems were understood and that this invention was the carefully considered answer. A quirky tidbit is that many purveyors of patent medicines or dubious gadgets established elaborate institutes or consulting rooms, often just a mailing address, to further enhance their image of medical or scientific legitimacy. This created a sense of a larger, credible organization behind the product. Then there was the power of the limited time offer, or the special introductory price. These classic marketing tactics created a sense of urgency, a fear of missing out on a unique opportunity. Act now, supplies are limited, or this incredible offer will not be repeated. Such phrases encouraged impulsive decisions, preventing too much careful consideration or skeptical inquiry. The idea that you were getting a bargain or accessing something exclusive was a powerful motivator. Historians of advertising note that these techniques, honed in the 19th century to sell everything from soap to questionable medical devices, remain remarkably effective even in today's sophisticated consumer landscape. The fundamental psychology of persuasion hasn't changed all that much. And let's not forget the sheer persistence. Advertisements for some of these useless inventions would run for years, even decades, becoming familiar, almost comforting, presences in popular publications. This repetition bred familiarity, and familiarity could sometimes be mistaken for legitimacy. If Dr. Mountebank's miracle liniment had been advertised every week for the past 10 years, surely there must be something to it. This slow, steady drip of persuasive messaging could wear down even the most skeptical consumer, especially if they were grappling with a persistent problem that the product promised to solve. The success of these hucksters wasn't just about trickery. It was about understanding human nature. They understood the power of hope, the burden of fear, the allure of a simple solution, and the comfort of a confident promise. As you drift through this world of softly spoken hype and masterfully crafted advertisements, you're not just observing a historical phenomenon. You're recognizing the enduring artistry of persuasion, an art that has convinced generations that perhaps, just perhaps, this oddly shaped piece of metal, this curiously colored tonic, this wonderfully implausible gadget, holds the key to a slightly better, or at least more interesting, life. The gentle whisper of the salesman's pitch is a timeless sound, echoing through the ages. The persuasive whispers of the huckster begin to fade, and you find yourself in a quieter, more contemplative space. The atmosphere is now tinged with a sense of gentle melancholy, like a dusty attic filled with forgotten treasures, or the hushed halls of a museum after closing time. We are considering the afterlife of awful inventions, the journey from celebrated flop or bewildering purchase to curious collectible and quiet museum piece, each one whispering its own peculiar tale of misplaced ingenuity and hopeful consumption. Imagine an invention that, in its heyday, was loudly proclaimed as the next great revolution in, say, personal grooming or household efficiency. Perhaps it was the automated shoe polisher, a complex contraption of whirring brushes and polished dispensers that promised a mirror shine with the mere insertion of a foot. For a brief period, it might have been a novelty, a conversation piece, but soon its flaws became apparent. It was too bulky, it splattered polish on trousers, it broke down frequently, or it simply didn't polish shoes any better than a good old-fashioned brush and some elbow grease. Production ceased, advertisements vanished, and the automated shoe polisher began its slow descent into obscurity. What happens then to such a marvel of misapplied mechanics? For a while, it might languish in the back of a closet, a silent, reproachful presence. Or it might be relegated to the attic or basement, joining other forgotten domestic dreams. You can almost picture it, gathering dust next to that complicated apple peeler we encountered earlier, or the ambitious but ultimately leaky early washing machine. There's a certain pathos to these objects, designed with such hope and conviction, now serving only as silent witnesses to changing times and evolving needs. They become part of the sedimentary layers of a household's history, occasionally rediscovered during a spring cleaning, prompting a bemused, "What on earth was this for?" Eventually, some of these items embark on a new journey. They might find their way to junk shops, flea markets, or antique stores. Here, they transition from being merely old stuff to becoming curiosities. A new generation, unfamiliar with their original purpose or the hype that surrounded them, might pick them up, intrigued by their strange form or their intricate, if non-functional, mechanisms. The original frustration or disappointment associated with the invention has long dissipated, replaced by a sense of historical amusement or aesthetic appreciation for its quaintness. That once maddeningly complex trouser press, for instance, might now be seen as a charming piece of Victorian craftsmanship, its original function almost secondary to its value as a decorative antique. And then, some of the most wonderfully useless, or historically significant in their uselessness, achieve a kind of immortality, they end up in museums. Not necessarily the grand national museums, but perhaps in smaller, specialized collections dedicated to the history of technology, domestic life, or even, in some delightful cases, museums of bad inventions or epic fails. Here, cleaned and catalogued, they are presented under soft lighting, accompanied by a small plaque explaining their often brief and unsuccessful purpose. They become educational tools, illustrating the trial and error nature of innovation, the social context of invention, and the sometimes comical gap between aspiration and reality. The mainstream historical fact is that many museums of science and industry actively collect and preserve examples of both successful and unsuccessful technologies, as both are crucial for understanding the trajectory of human ingenuity. A quirky tidbit is the rise of online communities and virtual museums dedicated to showcasing and discussing these failed or wonderfully weird inventions. Enthusiasts share pictures, research patent histories, and collectively marvel at the sheer audacity or baffling logic behind some of these creations. In this digital afterlife, the stories of these objects can reach a wider audience than ever before, their tales of woe or whimsy finding new appreciation. It's a testament to our enduring fascination with the what-ifs and why-nots of the inventive spirit. Historians and curators who study these objects often debate their cultural significance. Are they merely amusing footnotes in the grand narrative of progress? Or do they offer deeper insights into the anxieties, desires, and technological limitations of the societies that produced and consumed them? The very fact that someone invested time, effort, and resources into creating, for example, a device to mechanically tip one's hat speaks volumes about the social norms and expectations of that era. These objects are tangible links to the past, whispering not just of failed mechanics, but of forgotten customs and priorities. So, as you drift among these relics, you feel a sense of gentle respect. These weren't just awful inventions. They were embodiments of human creativity, however misguided. They represent risks taken, problems, real or imagined, tackled, and the persistent, often charmingly optimistic belief that there's always a better, or at least a more complicated, way to do things. The silence surrounding these faded flops in their display cases or dusty corners is not one of shame, but of a quiet, enduring narrative. A story of how even our failures can become fascinating echoes of who we once were and what we once hoped to achieve with a bit of brass, wood, and a wildly optimistic imagination. The quiet reverence of the museum gradually fades, and you feel your focus broadening, like a camera lens zooming out to encompass a wider landscape. While our journey so far has lovingly lingered on the delightfully dubious gadgets and contraptions, the human tendency for questionable acquisitions extends far beyond mere mechanical inventions. We now briefly expand our tranquil scope to consider some of the more of misguided purchases, those speculative manias, fleeting fads, and collectively embraced absurdities that, while not necessarily made of gears and springs, still represent a significant outlay of resources, hope, and occasionally common sense for returns that were often ephemeral or entirely illusory. Think for a moment beyond the tangible object you can hold in your hand and consider the allure of the intangible, sure thing. History is punctuated by speculative bubbles, periods of intense, irrational exuberance, where the price of an asset, be it tulip bulbs, railway shares, or dot-com stocks, becomes wildly detached from its intrinsic value. You can almost feel the feverish energy of these times, the whispers of fortunes being made overnight, the contagious optimism that pulls in even the most cautious individuals. The Dutch tulip mania of the 1630s is perhaps the most famous early example, a mainstream historical fact. Rare tulip bulbs became so extraordinarily prized that single bulbs were reportedly traded for houses or entire estates before the market, inevitably and catastrophically crashed, leaving many financially ruined. It wasn't a useless invention, but rather a collective, misguided belief in the ever-increasing value of a flower. Then there are the land speculation manias that have swept through various countries at different times. Imagine the scene. A charismatic promoter arrives in town, unfurling maps of a distant, undeveloped territory, painting lyrical pictures of fertile land, burgeoning cities, and untold opportunities. Invest now in the Paradise Valley development, the brochures might scream, and secure your future prosperity. People, eager for a fresh start or a quick profit, would pour their savings into plots of land they had never seen, sometimes in A, locations that were remote, inhospitable, or even entirely fictitious. The Florida land boom of the 1920s saw vast sums invested in swampland, sold to eager northerners dreaming of sunshine and easy riches, much of which collapsed spectacularly. The deeds to these worthless plots became, in their own way, relics of a misguided purchase, paper monuments to dashed hopes. Consider also the fleeting, all-consuming fads that capture the public imagination, prompting widespread acquisition of items or participation in activities that, in retrospect, seem bafflingly trivial. Think of the pet rock craze of the 1970s. Smooth stones marketed in little cardboard boxes with a humorous care and training manual. Millions were sold. It was a brilliant piece of marketing, a triumph of novelty over utility. But the need it fulfilled was entirely manufactured and ephemeral. Or recall the brief but intense societal obsession with, say, flagpoles sitting in the 1920s, or a particular style of collectible trading card in more recent decades, where perceived scarcity and peer enthusiasm drove prices to absurd heights for items of little inherent worth. The precise reasons for why certain fads catch fire while others fizzle out are still debated by sociologists and cultural historians. It often seems to be a perfect storm of novelty, social contagion, and clever marketing. And what about investments in grand, ambitious schemes that promise societal transformation but were ultimately ill-conceived or poorly executed? You might picture investors eagerly buying shares in a company proposing to build a canal across an impossible mountain range, or to extract gold from seawater using a revolutionary new process. The allure of being part of something groundbreaking, coupled with the promise of substantial returns, could be intoxicating. Many such grand ventures, fueled by optimistic engineering and even more optimistic financing, collapsed under their own weight, leaving behind a trail of disappointed shareholders and half-finished monumental follies. A quirky, lesser-known example might be the Poyer scheme in the 1820s, where a Scottish adventurer, Gregor MacGregor, convinced hundreds of British investors and settlers to sink their fortunes into a fictional Central American country he claimed to rule, leading to tragic consequences for those who actually sailed there. These more of misguided purchases, these speculative fevers and fleeting fads, share a common thread with the useless inventions we've explored. They tap into fundamental human desires for wealth, for status, for belonging, for a shortcut to happiness or success. They are often fueled by persuasive narratives, by the fear of missing out, and by a temporary suspension of critical judgment. The difference is that the product isn't always a tangible gadget that clutters a shelf, but sometimes an idea, a promise, a piece of paper representing a dream that never quite materializes. As you drift through these broader historical currents of collective misjudgment, you sense the same gentle, sleepy pull of human fallibility, the same endearing, if sometimes costly, optimism. Whether it's a self-straining teapot or a share in a non-existent gold mine, the underlying impulse to believe, to invest, to acquire based on hope rather than hard evidence, remains a constant and fascinating aspect of the human story. The rustle of worthless stock certificates and the faded ink on deeds to swampland join the quiet chorus of history's charmingly, sleepily misguided acquisitions. And so, as our gentle journey through the archives of the unnecessary and the ill-advised draws towards its close, you find yourself enveloped in a soft, reflective quiet. The echoes of whirring gears, persuasive sales pitches, and crashing markets have subsided, leaving a sense of calm understanding. We arrive now at our final contemplation. A gentle nod to nonsense, a quiet musing on why we, as humans, seem to possess an enduring, almost affectionate tendency to embrace the odd, the unnecessary, and the charmingly, sleepily useless. It's not simply about being tricked or being foolish, though moments of gullibility are certainly part of the human experience, as we've seen. There seems to be something deeper at play, a subtle appreciation for the absurd, a quiet delight in things that defy neat categorization or strict utilitarian purpose. Perhaps it's a form of playfulness, an intellectual tickle that comes from encountering an idea so outlandish, a contraption so convoluted that it makes you smile. Think back to some of the more whimsical inventions, the spectacles for chickens, or the automated hat tipper. Their very impracticality is a source of their charm. They represent a kind of creative exuberance that refuses to be entirely bound by the dictates of common sense. There's also an element of escapism in embracing the bizarre. The everyday world, with its routines and responsibilities, can sometimes feel overwhelmingly sensible. The wonderfully useless offers a brief, refreshing detour into a realm where logic takes a backseat to imagination. Acquiring a singing bird automaton, or a hopelessly complex trouser press, might have been a small act of rebellion against the mundane, a way to inject a little bit of eccentricity and wonder into one's personal space. These objects become conversation starters, not just for their function, or lack thereof, but for the story they tell about a different way of thinking. Moreover, our attraction to the odd can be a form of curiosity. Why did someone invent a self-rocking, steam-powered cradle? What thought process led to the development of a cranial conformator? Exploring these questions, even if the answers are elusive or slightly unsettling, expands our understanding of the sheer range of human thought and motivation. It reminds us that innovation isn't always a linear march towards perfection. Sometimes it meanders down delightfully quirky side paths. The mainstream historical fact is that many significant inventions actually arose from seemingly impractical or playful experimentation, where the inventor wasn't initially trying to solve a major problem, but was simply exploring an idea. This useless tinkering can sometimes lay the groundwork for future breakthroughs. And perhaps, in a way, these charmingly useless items also serve as a kind of memento mori for our own aspirations and endeavors. They remind us that not every idea will be a success. Not every effort will yield the intended result. There's a certain humility in acknowledging the long history of human misjudgment and well-intentioned folly. It connects us to those earnest Victorian inventors in their cluttered workshops, to the hopeful consumers poring over advertisements for electric corsets, and to the speculators dreaming of tulip-fueled riches. We see ourselves, or at least a part of our shared human nature, reflected in their charmingly misguided pursuits. The very act of collecting these historical oddities, of preserving their stories in museums or in our collective memory, suggests a kind of affection. We don't just mock these failed inventions or forgotten fads. We often find them endearing. They represent a less serious, more whimsical side of human history. They are the playful footnotes in the grand, often solemn, narrative of progress. It's a subject of ongoing, gentle discussion among cultural commentators why exactly bad art or failed designs can sometimes evoke such strong, almost cult-like followings. Is it irony, nostalgia, or a genuine appreciation for something that dared to be different, even if it didn't quite work? This embrace of the bizarre, this nod to nonsense, might also be a quiet acknowledgement of the limits of pure rationality. Life isn't always about efficiency or optimization. Sometimes it's about the spark of joy found in the unexpected, the smile elicited by the utterly superfluous. These objects and ideas, in their splendid uselessness, remind us that there's room for whimsy, for eccentricity, for the sheer, unadulterated joy of a silly idea pursued with earnest conviction. They are, in their own quiet way, a celebration of the wonderfully unpredictable and often delightfully illogical human spirit. As you let these thoughts settle, you feel a sense of gentle amusement, a soft appreciation for all the wonderfully pointless things that have brought a little bit of strange, sleepy joy into the world. And so, our exploration of the delightfully, drowsily useless comes to a gentle close. The images of peculiar gadgets and forgotten fads begin to soften now, like old photographs fading at the edges. The whirs and clicks of imaginary machines grow fainter, replaced by the steady, calming rhythm of your own breathing. You feel a sense of peaceful contentment, a quiet understanding that even in our most misguided endeavors, there's a certain charm, a certain humanity. Let the oddities and absurdities we've wandered through tonight become like distant, half-remembered dreams, curiosities tucked away in the quiet attic of your mind. There's no need to analyze them further, no need to puzzle over their peculiar logic. Simply allow the stories to drift, like fallen leaves on a gentle stream, carrying you further into a state of deep relaxation. The allure of the newfangled, the earnestness of the Victorian inventor, the perplexing charm of fashion's follies, all these now recede, leaving behind only a sense of calm and the soft embrace of approaching sleep. The world of striving and inventing, of buying and regretting, can rest for now. You are in a safe, quiet space where the only thing that matters is the gentle descent into slumber. Let any remaining thoughts dissolve like sugar in warm tea, sweetening the path to your dreams. Every breath you take is a soft wave, washing away the day, carrying you closer to the shores of peaceful, restorative rest. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to consider, only the easy, effortless drift into the deep, quiet night. Sweet dreams.